Good afternoon, lovely friends. How are you all today? Oh, it's chilly. It's chilly enough for my brand new titfer from Kay. Thank you so much, Kay. But it's dry and it's bright. It's beautifully bright this afternoon. Oh, it makes such a change, doesn't it? Just lifts the soul. So today I thought, just one of my friends is leaving. Yes, sorry, distracted. First of all, before I do anything, I'm so giddy today, I don't know why. I want to say a hello, a little shout out to Claire in Basingstoke. Hello, Claire. What a random connection we have. Thank you for watching, Claire. So, anyway, today it's all about the frequently asked questions to do with my garden. So many questions that get asked over and over again. I thought the simplest thing to do today would be to tackle them all in one go. Specifically, questions about the setup, the size, the rules, the regulations, etc., etc. So not questions about the actual produce I grow. So, just before we go out into the brightness and the chilliness, because it is quite chilly today. First things first, what is an allotment? I get asked this a lot from people outside of the UK. In a lot of countries you will have something similar by way of, say, community gardens, I don't know what else you'll call them. But in the UK, an allotment, very simply, it's a piece of land owned by someone else, which then gets parcelled up into individual plots, which are then rented out to individuals such as myself. Now, in the UK, most allotment sites are owned by either the council, so that's the local bit of government, or they're owned by the parish, quite often the church, or sometimes the piece of land is owned by a charity. The idea being that once these sites are created, they shouldn't ever be uncreated, as in that land shouldn't then be sold off for building on. It does happen occasionally. Allotments go way back, way over 100 years. The way they are today in some ways hasn't changed very much, in other ways there have been changes. So once upon a time, we're coming to size now, once upon a time a single plot was made up of 10 rods. Now rods are a very old-fashioned term of measurement, which doesn't mean much to anyone these days. I'll explain the size properly when we go out there. But yes, the old plots, initially plots were 10 rods. I have a half plot, so my plot is 5 rods. And on our site, all the plots are divided in half, so they're all 5 rod plots. We've got a couple, just 2 plots, which have been further divided. So there are 4 little plots. So if you imagine the size of my plot in half, and then the next plot to mine in half again. So we've got 4 little plots side by side, and we use those as kind of starter, taster plots. So I'll talk about the waiting list now. So if someone applies to get an allotment, we get an allotment come free. We invite that person to come down and have a look to see if they'd like to take it on. Occasionally people are a bit daunted by the size of the plots, which I understand if it's a really overgrown plot, but as far as I'm concerned, my plot's tiny. But in those instances, they can go on to one of these really tiny plots as a taster, starter plot, if you like. If they get on with it and they really love it and they find they've got the time for it and a full plot becomes free, they can then move on to a full plot, and then that frees up another little starter plot for someone else. So the way we get a plot in the UK, depending on who owns the land, in my case, on my site, it's the local council. You write to the council and say, I would like an allotment, please. And you go onto a waiting list. I was really lucky in that I think I was on the waiting list for maybe, it was either 2 or 3 years before I was offered my plot. In some areas, the waiting list is 50 years plus. But yes, once you come to the top of the waiting list, whoever looks after the site, the secretary, the chair, that sort of thing, you'll be invited to have a look. When I came to look at my plot, there were actually three plots that had become available. One at the far end of the site that way, one at the far end of the site that way, and mine sat bang in the middle. The minute I saw mine, I saw the potential in terms of the light. It would get light all day. I'm not at the perimeter, so I would have no shade from trees and all that sort of thing. So I took it. Yay! So, because it's only rented, we pay rent to the council. My half plot rent per year is £52, but that includes my actual plot plus my fee for the water, and there's a little bit of a fee in there, I think, as well for insurance. Yes, I think we have a little bit of insurance in that too. There are all sorts of communal parts to the plot as well, which obviously things like that will vary massively from site to site. In terms of regulations and rules, we don't have many. We're not that strict here. One of the main rules is buildings. We are not allowed, and you'll get an idea of this when we go out in a second, we're not allowed to put up any permanent structure within our plot that's over 4 feet high. So things like sheds, greenhouses, etc. are all kept to the perimeter, and I really like that because it keeps the site open, there's good light. It just means that there's no danger of someone putting up a shed in the middle of their plot and that casting shadow onto someone else's plot, because that just wouldn't be fair, obviously. So otherwise, in terms of rules and regulations and our individual responsibilities, there aren't many. I mean, there's a whole lot of rules, but they're, it's just sensible things like making sure you lock up when you leave, not being horrible to other people, not creating litter, etc., etc. And in terms of caring for the plot, of course, we're expected to look after our plots, and we are expected within a year of taking a plot on to have it 75% cultivated. Because if after one whole year you can't cultivate 75% of a half plot, you're probably never going to get it done. Once you're at the stage where the whole plot is cultivated, you are expected to maintain in terms of keeping the weeds down, cutting the grass paths around. People are allowed trees on their plots, fruit trees, but they shouldn't get taller than 6 feet. So occasionally someone will get a letter to say, your tree is now 10 feet tall, can you please prune it? But all those rules that are in place, it's all about sort of being good neighbours with each other and being considerate of each other. So, yeah, fine, why not? Right, okay, let's get outside so I can talk about the layout, size, etc. properly, and then I'm going to go and show you some of our little communal bits, and I think then it might be time for a cup of tea. Chilly, come on, let's go outside. Well, this is a shot you'll be familiar with, except it's at arm's length rather than on the tripod today. Me outside my shed. I'll explain more about the layout of the whole site in the sheds shortly. But just to say, to orientate you, obviously you see my shed table quite often, pricking things out, dealing with my harvests, what have you. It's not directly next to my plot. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to spin you all around. Try not to do it too quickly and give you motion sickness. There's Mr. Rusty, he's had his cuddle, he's wandering off. So here we go. Here's my table. Here's my shed. Here's Sheddy. Shed. tripod, granny trolley. So this plot, it's another half plot immediately in front of my plot, and this belongs to my next door neighbours whose shed is here. So for every 2 plots, there's a plot here, then my plot. Imagine this divided in half as we come this way. I get a space for my shed, they get a space for their shed. And because there's only that limited space, you either have to choose between having a shed or a greenhouse. I chose a shed because it's much more practical. Greenhouse would be lovely, no space for one. So as I was saying, there's this plot and then my plot. And let's go up the path a minute so I can explain how these plots are laid out for the site. Let's just grab this. You're going to come for a walk with me, Rusty? Hey, buddy. So next door, this is another half plot. She is still fairly new. Going up the path. So between each plot, every plot has a grass path like this between them. So there's a plot here, mine, and my neighbour's plot. Hello, Shadow. And then between each plot, there's a path. So there's my path. And likewise, there's the girls' plot. This other plot, as I was mentioning. And there's their path. So each little plot is bounded on all sides by a grass path like this. There's another one over there, next to my neighbour's fence arrangement. A path at the back of the plot. And then coming along, right up to the top of my plot, we come out onto the central path. So, this central path goes, we're going to be right into the sunshine, brace yourselves. So, up that way, and way down there. I'm going to be a bit squinty. So yeah, as I was explaining, we've got this lovely long central path, communal areas down there, main communal areas, a couple of communal areas up there, but essentially this lovely long central path, and then off the path there are 2 half plots. So exactly as I showed you a second ago, there's my plot here, then my neighbour's just in front of my shed. I like it, it's neat, it's organised, and then right around the perimeter are all the sheds and greenhouses, and it just means, like I say, it keeps the site beautifully open, bright, and breezy on a day like today. Just having seen Rusty as well, this is another frequently asked question. No, I don't own any of the cats. I think they own me a little bit. All the cats that you have seen, they all live in the houses around about, so central path, plot, sheds, houses and back gardens. So basically the whole allotment site is one big playground for the kitties. Okay, so that's the layout explained. And just to say, where I'm facing you now, I'm facing directly south. So where my plot is here, that's why you'll tend to see I grow smaller things at this edge, getting taller at the back, because this is where I get all of the light from. So all my beds are orientated to make the most of this gorgeous south-facing aspect. In terms of wind, the prevailing wind, it always seems to come this way. Either this way or ever so slightly from southwest. But we do get quite a bit of wind across the site. Partly we don't have the big structures to do any buffering. But I don't mind a bit of a stiff breeze. Right, let's talk some numbers about my plot. When I first took my plot on, there was no layout to it. It was pretty much just all grass, brambles, weeds, raspberries everywhere. And I just kept it really simple. I made these 4 big beds, which are subsequently divided up. So I'm standing in bed number 2 at the moment. I always refer to it as beds 1, 2, 3, 4. bed number 1, where my gorgeous tree lily is, right next to the central path. The other thing, just to say very quickly, is I like having my plot at this end rather than down there outside my shed, because for it being here, as people are walking up and down the path, it's great. I get to chat to people. Love it. I mean, if I'm sitting outside the shed, that doesn't stop me because folk come down the path to have a chat. Anyway, yes, so I initially divided it into these 4 big beds. So each bed measures approximately 6 metres this way by about 4 metres that way. So let's call it roughly 25 square metres per bed. In other words, I've got about 100 square metres of growing space within these 4 main beds. Subsequently, I've dug out and developed the herb bed, which is only about 3 metres by 1.5 metres. Not huge, but it's a nice little space, and obviously partly that's because the space is taken up with the cold frame. And then obviously I've nicked a little bit of space by the deck to have a bit more growing. But essentially for the vast majority of my veg growing, I'm doing it in 100 square metres, which is not huge, but it just shows how much produce you can get from a small area. Then last year I made the decision to try to make each bed a bit more permanent. So instead of each winter as I used to, it's chilly, digging out my mud paths each year, putting the field beans in, what have you, these little paths are now staying permanently. So my new layout has 5 beds, little mini beds within the large bed. So they are obviously 4 metres long by about 1.20 m wide, which is perfect for me in terms of reach, as in reaching into the middle to harvest or weed, what have you, tickle it with a fork. It's working out absolutely perfectly for me. I'm chuffed. So that's the size. Obviously you see where my fence is, so just to kind of sort of reaffirm that, the fence is the end of my plot. Behind the fence, that's the communal path. Then my neighbour's plot starts, and that goes all the way up to my shed. Ooh, what can I show you next? Oh yes, let me show you some of the community stuff. I'm just looking back down our main central path, because one of the things I forgot to mention, and it is something I get asked about a lot, is you see this here, and then dunk, dunk, dunk. These are our water tanks. They're just open topped, they're dip tanks. They have ball cocks on them, so much like you would have in your lavatory, so that as they get emptied, they fill again and stop short of overspilling. So we have them sort of on ends, alternating in a zigzag as we go up the main path, so that hopefully no one is ever more than about 2 or 3 plots away from being able to access one of these water dip tanks. So part of our rent is to pay for water. We do shut the water off at about this time of year, well actually earlier than this, end of October normally, and then it doesn't get turned on again until March, April or so. So we do have access to this. It's mains water, but everybody is encouraged to affix a water butt or more to their shed or greenhouses for water catchment. And we do have communal water butts dotted around everywhere as well, because obviously we'd like to bring our water bill down, but we should just be doing that anyway, collecting our own water. Right, let's go up the path and round the corner. I'm sitting here on top of the steps which lead into our composting lavatory. You may have seen earlier in the year, I think it was April or so, when Kay and I built these steps, the little platform outside, the rails, with a bit of help from the chairman, of course. So yes, we have a composting loo, and the reason we've got the steps up and the platform is because essentially the loo's here. It's just a big wheelie bin with a piece of wood with a hole cut in it. Do your business, goes in the wheelie bin. They get sealed up when they're full. We let them rot down a couple of years and then we can use it. And just mentioning that day when we made these new stairs, one of the other responsibilities, although you don't have to, is once a month, it's usually the first weekend or so of the month, we have what we call a working party. And that's when, in an ideal world, all the plot holders, at least once a year anyway, we will come together, not to work on our own plots, but to work on all the communal areas. So on days like those, we would do things like fixing these stairs, or if one of those water tanks that I was just showing you, if one of them's got a leak, get down there, dig, find that pipe, fix the leak. All sorts of other things, trimming overhanging branches. We've got a lot of sort of shrubbery all around our edges, so make sure that's kept trimmed so that it's not going over and into neighbours' gardens and annoying them. But they're great days because, you know, generally there are days when the work is physical, it's really physical and can be quite tough. But we always finish those days with good old sit down, cup of tea and a mountain of cake. And it's just a really nice way to spend time with our fellow plot holders. It really cements relationships and friendships, so it's great. Okay, so this is our composting loo. On the far side there is a water butt. Let me show you what's at the other end of sight. Momentary detour to my shed. One of the joys of allotment life is you never know who you're going to see unless you sort of pre-arranged to meet someone. Anyway, one of my friends has arrived and I had something for her in my shed, so that's why I've come back to the shed for a minute. And just before we go to the far end of the site, it's something I'm not going to film today because I don't want to be poking around and disturbing. We've got a very quiet area set to one side. It's right at the far end of the site. We try to not disturb the area at all. We've got a wildlife area. So we've got a large pond. We have log piles everywhere. So beautiful habitat for insects, for our gorgeous amphibious friends. Obviously it's somewhere that the birds go and peck around in the rotting logs. And then next to that we have some beehives. Now the beehives aren't owned, looked after, however you want to put it, by one of the plot holders. They belong to a local beekeeper. And this is another wonderful community thing. It's totally symbiotic relationship. He needed somewhere to put his hives. We had the perfect little, really quiet space that nobody goes to. So he's got somewhere to keep his bees. And of course, we are all growing the most beautiful food for his bees. So we don't see him that often. I keep meaning to try and catch up with him because I would love to learn how to keep bees, and then I could offer to look after them if ever he's away, but I just never seem to coincide with him, which is a shame. But we do get first dibs on the honey that is made in those hives, and of course it's beautiful. Of course it's going to be beautiful. They've made it from my veggie flowers and a few others. Right, okay, before anyone else turns up at the shed and sidetracks me completely, because I do love to sit and chat with my mates, let's head off right down to the far end, the other far end of the site, and begin to wrap things up. And I need to begin to wrap myself up. Now I'm at the complete opposite end of our site, in a little spot that any of you who've watched the videos often enough will recognise as our little orchard area. It's not huge, but we've got, I've forgotten how many trees we've got now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. We've got about 10 fruit trees over here, mostly apples. We've got a plum. It's just nice to have this little bit of space it would be a bit too scrappy to develop as a plot for somebody, but it's perfect to have these communal trees. And you might think, oh gosh, you know, how do you divide the goodies, as it were? To be honest, we all really enjoy tons of fruit from these trees, and it never seems that anyone, we never get to the stage where anyone complains that there's no fruit left, someone stripped all of it. You know, there's plenty to go around. And I think in general, people are sensible. I don't think, you know, someone's not going to come along and take 200 apples all in one go. So it works fine. We had a little bit of excess money from the rents and the costs. We had a little bit spare, so we took a vote and decided to invest in an apple press, which is lovely. As long as people on apple pressing day don't have any more accidents. Eek! But yeah, it's a really nice spot to have. It's generally really quiet. You can hear some squeals of joy at the moment because there's a park just there, and it's, what day is it today? I think it's Sunday. But yeah, it's a nice quiet spot to come and sit. I love it. Just a little a ways from us, I'm not going to go there now, but what will be a couple of plots over, we've got another area that's plot sized, but we don't have a plot there, it's just grass. And next to it we've got our communal sheds where we've got we've got running water. We don't have a drain, so we've built a sump for it, but we've got running water, and we've got, you know, sort of tea, coffee making facilities, little kitchen area, table and chairs, so if folk want to meet, sit and have a chat and it's a rainy day, they can go in there. And then the plot-sized grassy area outside of that we use for other communal gatherings through the year. So for example, the summer barbecue, that's where that happens. So we put our gazebo up, and this year we had a badminton court set up, etc, etc. So yeah, there's a really lovely communal and community aspect to my plot. I know a lot of you frequently comment on the fact that I'm really lucky to have such lovely neighbours, and I am. I know that I'm really lucky to have such lovely neighbours, and I hope I contribute to my neighbours by being lovely to them. Yay! But yeah, I think that's about it with my frequently asked questions. The main ones being, I don't have a greenhouse because there's no space for one. I use the space for my shed. In total, I have about 100 square metres of growing space, and the cats all belong to houses around the perimeter of our site. They just come onto site because they know they can get some cuddles for free. All right, my lovelies, thank you for coming around with me today and hanging out with me. I hope that's answered, that should have answered all those questions that are always coming up. I hope it has. Anyway, despite the brightness, it's getting really quite chilly, so I think I need to get stuck into some more leaf raking to warm myself up. That's what I'm going to do. I will see you all again really soon. In fact, I think, when's the next time you're going to see me? Oh, I know what it is. I'll see you then. But for now, cheerio. Please take care of yourselves. Enjoy your beautiful garden spaces. Enjoy your community within your garden. Just enjoy whatever you're up to. See you soon. Bye for now.